Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome to episode 306 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by, of course, JFtC. Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome back to another week of Blue Jays Talk for All, brought to you by JFromTheCouch.com. We're streaming live every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, where you can watch live and send in your comments and questions and all of that fun stuff. We'll put it right up on the screen, and you can be part of our show. And, of course, don't worry if you missed the live streaming. It's okay. It's all good. You can just go back through the archives of YouTube and Facebook and everywhere else we are and look for our shows, and you can catch up on all of our past episodes. And the audio version, if you are an audio only type of person, that's okay. We've got stuff for you as well. Head to Apple, Stitcher, anywhere, iHeartRadio, anywhere you find podcasts, you'll find Jays from the Couch. Give us a subscribe and we'd be forever in your debt. I'm your host, as always, Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at JFtC. We've got a great episode for you this week. I'm very excited, actually. Blue Jays aren't doing so hot. And even though it's the middle of August and it's supposed to be hot, the Blue Jays are not. And, of course, everybody is handling it with a reasonable amount of calm and, as you would come to expect from Blue Jays Nation. But we're going to get into that, maybe look at some what's going on. Is it really all that bad? And all of that fun stuff. So don't miss this episode. Keep it tuned here for all of your Blue Jays content. All right, and now to help me this week, my co-hosts, as always, first of all, host of the On Feck Circle, Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the Fekless Wonder himself, Steve Feck. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Sean. How are you?
I'm here, and you know what, I was thinking this might be a difficult episode for you, given the fact that we've got, let's see, some negative, I guess, feelings and emotions around this Blue Jays team, and you're going to be chomping at the bit to say I told you so, but it ain't over till it's over, and that's why we've got Karen, host of the Sunny Side of the Dome, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Karen will balance out all of the negativity and all of that stuff and tell us why we're all incredibly wrong. So both of you, welcome. Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, we've got a first comment here, and you know what, I was going to wait, but I'll just throw them up here now. Sue is watching at home on YouTube. Thank you again, Sue. And she says, yay, missed you all. Had to listen to educational podcasts last week. Oh, man, Sue, that is probably
and
the worst
she
thing
was
we
on
could have done.
vacation, so she had the chance to actually watch us live last week.
Oh, brutal. Well, it's going to be a different episode for you this week, Sue, because I don't know that you'll learn very much, but we'll see what we can do for you. Typically, every week we lead off our show with the MLB Minute, whereby we choose a topic from out there in the baseball world. Could be anything that's going on around Major League Baseball, and we each spend 1 minute discussing that topic, like a roundtable kind of thing. No arguing back and forth or anything like that. We save that for later. But we've got this week I wanted to kind of talk about playoffs, because I feel like it's on everybody's mind, particularly with the Toronto Blue Jays, and I had to correct a couple of people that I care about with regard to their nonsensical belief that the Toronto Blue Jays are going to finish in last place suddenly. So playoffs are on everybody's mind. But if you look around Major League Baseball, there's a lot of effort put into, and we've heard a lot about this competitive balance thing and trying to expand playoffs and things like that to try and generate, as well as I do, engagement means generate more income. But here we have it, new-ish playoff format in each league, with top two getting a bye, and then the three wildcard teams trying to fight their way through and all of that stuff. So what it does do is it kind of creates a trade deadline where more people feel that they're in it, in the race. Suddenly the Baltimore Orioles are in a race. And nobody saw that coming, and don't even Christian Rao of the Rao Report on Slasher Sports. You do wonderful work on your podcast, but don't you dare tell me you thought the Baltimore Orioles would be fighting for a playoff spot in August. I will call you a liar, sir. But anyway, but that's where we are, right? The kind of the landscape of baseball over the last few weeks has been there more teams have a chance. So with that in mind, I think I'd like to kind of 1 minute talking about the playoff picture. Do we like the structure? Do we like how it'll break down? And do we like what it's doing for, for fans, essentially? Because that's what it should be doing something for. Anyway, so 1 minute, Steven. I'm going to start with you. You get 1 minute to discuss the Major League Baseball playoffs and the impact it's having already.
Well, I think for the casual fan and the younger fan that you're trying to draw in and get them away from the other sports they seem to be gravitating towards, I think it's a great thing to have another, more not competitive, but more teams to be able to make that postseason. I'm old school. I didn't like the original wild card, but when they went to three divisions, you had to come up with something. But I think 6 is a good number. I think it did make a difference as far as how teams approach the trade deadline and some of the return they got on some of the players. So from that standpoint, it's good. I think we'll have to see how the playoff round plays out, because will those first round buys negatively affect the teams that earned them by having the best records?
Look at you. You finished with 4 seconds to spare. You're like a professional. This is amazing. And Karen, good luck, because Steve set the bar. All right, Karen, 1 minute begins now.
Yeah, good luck to me. I mean, for a long time, I've been saying that there aren't enough teams that make the postseason in Major League Baseball. I mean, the NBA, the NHL, they all have 16 teams. And why we're like only after expanding and expanding was Major League Baseball stuck on 10. I'm glad they're at 12. I'm glad that an extra team in each league will get in as compared to the last few years. And I mean, you look at the American League, that there are now 10 teams that are either currently in possession of a playoff spot or single digits away from a playoff spot. So at least in theory, 10 out of 15 teams have a chance. I think it's exciting for the teams. I think it's exciting for the fans. And you touched on it a bit as far as, because there are now in theory that many more buyers, it's a seller's market. And if anything...
I'll let you finish your thought, Karen.
I yield my 4 seconds that I had to.
Thanks. Yes.
From Toronto, yes.
I'm wondering if teams that aren't necessarily in the race this year might have a quicker path to rebuilding because of the big haul that they're able to get for top players like Cincinnati for Luis Castillo. And so if that was ever part of the plan or not, I don't know, but it might be a byproduct.
It's an excellent point. Now I'm going to have to kind of vamp for a little bit during my 1 minute, but I actually do like, for the same reasons that we've heard here already. I like the fact that we're talking in the middle of August and there are that many teams and their fans who have a vested interest in the standings, right? Because I can remember a time where it was like you're watching 2 teams fight it out. and then the rest of the teams, you kind of forget about them, right? So it's a good thing for baseball that they have this many fans engaged in their postseason leading up to the postseason. I think it'll actually make their postseason that much better, and I think and more fans will enjoy it. So, for example, if you're one of those fans who kind of stop watching when your team gets eliminated, I think you'll catch a few more of those fans because their team was at least in it at the beginning, right? And I think that's good for baseball too. So, yeah, there we go. I knew it was coming. All right.
And if only there'd been 12 teams last year instead of 10, a team that went 91 and 71 would have gone to the playoffs.
It's true, and
we can get rid of the commissioner's trophy and just have those little, good sport participation medals that we can hand out to all the players of all the teams.
Sure, why not? I think anyway. I was going to continue with that, but but what I do like though is that the American League East, it could have potentially, like right now there are 4 teams right in the mix, and at any day now that could include the Boston Red Sox as well. Like, let's be real here. I don't know what Chris Sale is doing on his bike, but at least he's not cutting up jerseys, right? So there's that. Yet, but in it's not out of the realm of possibility that Boston could have some kind of turnaround. New York could continue being what we thought they would be, and the division could look a lot more interesting. Steve, I wanted to start with you, though. When you look at the playoff picture, what surprises stand out to you as far as maybe who's winning divisions, who's not? And of course, you could mention the Baltimore Orioles if you wish.
I would say the only real surprise for me is the Cleveland Guardians, because they don't have any power outside of Jose Ramirez in that lineup. The only other power bat they got, they already DFA'd him and sent him to Chicago in Franmil Reyes. All of the other scenarios really don't surprise me. I think the Orioles have earned this. I don't know that they have the staying power at this point. I really haven't delved into their innings and they don't seem to be so involved in managing their young players. They just want to get them developed, and then when they're ready, then they bring them up, and then it's all hands on deck. But I think Cleveland's really the only surprise. But when you watch them over the weekend, you can see why you really shouldn't be surprised. Because, they can pitch. They can run the bases. They're a solid defensive team. In fact, they may be one of the better, I didn't look at the metrics, but they may be one of the better defensive teams, in the league. So, you can say, okay, the White Sox, are a surprise because they're so disappointing. They just can't seem to get things together. And I don't buy into it's the injuries. Lots of teams had injuries. Okay. Tampa Bay's still in it. They've had more injuries than anybody. We certainly have hung tough with all the injuries we have had. So I don't know that there's a lot of surprises for me. There's a lot of worries for me. But I don't know that there's a lot of surprises for me.
We'll definitely get into your worries here in a little bit. But Karen, when you look around Major League Baseball at the playoff picture, are there any surprises that stand out to you, or is it pretty much how you thought it would be?
Yeah, there are some things that surprise me, and more of my attention is on the American League than it is on the National League. But yeah, I didn't expect the Red Sox to be great. I thought they would be better than they've been. I knew that eventually the Orioles would stop being bottom feeders, but I didn't think this was the year. I didn't think they were close to that. And yeah, I thought, the White Sox won the AL Central last year. I thought they would again this year, and they're not really there, and the Rays, but then that's injuries, and yeah, just so many different things. I mean, Cleveland, like you said, the whole when there was all the talk in the offseason about the possibility of the Jays trading for Jose Ramirez, a big part of the premise behind that was, well, Cleveland isn't really contending or expected to be contending this year, so they might be better off trading Ramirez, rebuilding and all of that, and like getting prospects, getting younger. They might lose him, and then of course he signed the extension. But yeah, there's lots, and the Yankees overall. I mean, I didn't expect them to be as good as they were early in the season. And then I remember telling a friend of mine, they're not going to be this hot all season. They are going to come back to earth. Well, I didn't expect them to come crashing back to earth. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think for me it was the Yankees at the beginning of the season. I was very surprised to see where they were. Now I'm surprised to see Baltimore where they are. But as you were talking, I'm thinking about when you look at Boston and Baltimore together, and their situations are so different. So let's just pretend here for a second that this is how things are going to finish, and Boston finishes in last place and Baltimore doesn't. Okay, Baltimore, it's a pleasant surprise, but that wasn't their goal for this season. It's as Steve said already, it's let's get these guys developed, get them acclimated even, and let somebody like Ryan Mountcastle really establish himself, that kind of thing. Now they're talking, well, I believe I read just either this morning or yesterday, their GM talking about they could increase their payroll by quite a bit.
Yeah.
Right. No, I would be surprised, in all honesty, because I don't know how close the Orioles are. This might be a 2020 Toronto Blue Jays thing, where their young guys are playing well, but they're not a playoff team yet. Regardless, the Boston Red Sox could fix their issues overnight, right? They
could be the 2020 Blue Jays that actually go out and secure multiple additions to their pitching staff, which the 2020 Blue Jays did not do.
I assume you're talking about
the Orioles. Yeah, so I think when he's saying we're going to spend money, they don't really need to spend money on a position player. I think they would like to give some of those young arms that are going to be up eventually a little extra seasoning. So I think when he says I'm going to up the payroll significantly, I think he's talking about getting one or two veteran starters, maybe have some of their young guys in the bullpen develop that way. Sort of like using that Astros model since he came from Houston to go to Baltimore. I think he might do that. I think that's where the thing is. So it wouldn't surprise me. They have the revenues coming in. People are coming to the stadium again. They've got a terrific deal with Masson. I mean, as far as their revenues, even though really the Nationals kind of get a bigger cut of that pie, they have the revenues there. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to.
Right. However, they are very much still a team that's up and coming, whereas, Boston, I would put into the category of a team that's, yes, we had one disappointing season this year, but we're not rebuilding. We're not tearing it down. We're going to, because I don't know how many Red Sox fans would be okay with a teardown or a rebuild, but anyway, we've gone a while and haven't talked about our Toronto Blue Jays. So let's take our conversation there, because the Blue Jays are currently in a playoff spot. And I feel like I need to say that at the beginning of this discussion, because I'm out yesterday, my own ball game, and so we're all hanging around eating afterwards, and I was told that the Blue Jays are not going to be one of the playoff teams by the end of the season. And I attributed that to too much sun and too much of a certain beverage.
Yeah.
But There you go. Yeah. Because there's no way that anybody could actually honestly believe that, right? And I'm looking at it right now. The Toronto Blue Jays are in the first wild card spot. They're a game up, excuse me, a game up on Seattle, who actually, I will say, has been a surprise for me. And I know there will be people out there who say it shouldn't have been, but it is. And then Tampa Bay holds that final wild card spot with Baltimore next up at a game and a half back. And then, of course, you've got the Twins and the White Sox 2 games back. Even the Red Sox are 4.5 back, right? So it's not impossible. Anyway, the Blue Jays have a playoff spot. They are a playoff team right now. They are a playoff team. You can't. It's not like you can say, no, they're not. They're not a playoff team. Yes, it's right here. They're, and they're 10 games back of first place in the division, and I would say the only other team in their division playing worse than them is the New York Yankees. So, anyway, I wonder, first of all, and Steve, I am going to start with you. This idea that they're done, that, and I know you see the logic. They do hold a wild card spot right now. They are in the playoffs. I know you see that. And I know that, well, I don't want to speak for you, but I believe you think they will still be a playoff team later on. So my question to you, though, Steve, is how comfortable is their playoff spot in your mind?
Well, as far as holding the top wild card spot, I don't think it's very comfortable at all. I think it's one of those things you see, Sikhs laying on beds of nails, in the Indian subcontinent. I mean, it's that kind of comfort. I guess it relieves tension to not lay on those nails, but it's got to hurt. I've said, even in my most negative times on my show, that there's no way the Jays aren't going to make the playoffs. But I'm starting to feel nervous even about saying that, because they're one big injury to a pitcher and one big injury, whether it be Springer not being able to come back, even though he's been reactivated, away from letting it all slip away. And honestly, I guess what makes me uncomfortable is that I believe this is a special roster, and that with the right upgrades and with being a little bit more aggressive, we wouldn't be having conversations behind the scenes on our chat, on our message boards, saying, well, we should absolutely be all in next year. That should not be conversations with this team. That's where my frustrations are. When I watch the Blue Jays, I see how good they should be, not could be, how good they should be, and they're not that good. And to make the playoffs, but then lose in the first round with this roster, with this team, it's unacceptable.
Yeah, I first round exit is a disappointment. I especially when this is a team where I really thought was going to win the division. And yes, there's still a chance it can still happen, sure. But realistically, that's a tough uphill battle. And so, yeah, I would say a first round exit is a disappointment, even though there will be people who say, well, hold on, they didn't even get into the playoffs last year. So this is a step forward. And that can be debated forever, whether or not this season is a step forward. But Karen, I want to, before we get too far down this discussion, I want to check in with you and just, what is it? How comfortable are you right now with their postseason position?
Not as comfortable as I'd like to be, or that I expected to be. But yeah, I mean, I would be shocked if the Blue Jays don't at least make the playoffs. But I really I'd love to see them win the division. I really think it's a long shot. I mean, every now and then I check out the MLB playoff odds on Fangraphs and Baseball Reference, and I don't know why they're so different. I'd love to know what criteria one uses that the other doesn't. But just as of today, their odds of making the playoffs were just over 90%, and odds of winning the division were, I think, 4 or 5%. And realistically, that's about what I'd say it would be. I'd love to see them win that division, get into better positioning and so forth. But I've sort of resigned myself to saying, okay, they're going to be a wild card team. I really want them to be the first wild card team. I want them to host that series. I think that could and will make all the difference in the world. And I mean, I think this team is fantastic. And they, as much as I am one of the many Blue Jay fans that wanted a bigger splash at the deadline. What I had my heart set on was Luis Castillo, because what that would have done for the rotation. But obviously they didn't get that. Midge White, I mean, he's not Luis Castillo, but so far so good. I like what I've seen from him. I think the additions that they did make are better than I thought they were. I can't speak for anybody else, but I still think they've got a chance for this to be a special season, not only getting into the playoffs, but how far they go in the playoffs, because they've got all kinds of talent. About the only thing that they really haven't improved is their base running. But I mean, they've got starting pitching, they've got a better bullpen than a lot of people realize. That they've got an offense that their OPS is still third best in baseball, in spite of the ups and downs and the fact that they've cooled off lately. The unfortunate thing is that they've been streaky. And in a way, like I was saying to my husband not that long ago, the closest comparison I can think of in recent memory is the 2016 Blue Jays, where at times they were really ice cold. I mean, I remember going to the last home game of the regular season, not knowing if they were even going to the playoffs, and they just looked so flat against the Baltimore Orioles. Like it seemed like, they're going to be lucky to even get in. And then they squeak in on the last day, and then all of a sudden they get hot for the wild card game, for the ALDS, but then come the ALCS, and they looked unfortunately overmatched. So I would like to, we've seen, at times the offense has been hot, at other times the pitching has carried them. And what the Blue Jays really, really need, and I think they can do it, I just don't know if they will do it, but put all the pieces of the puzzle together. I mean, they're a better defensive team than they were in recent memory. That's one thing that really needed to get better, and it did. It has. And they all need to put the parts together at the same time. They need to go on a run, which they're very capable of doing, get hot at the right time, and anything's possible.
Yeah, and I think you provided a perfect segue into the rest of the discussion, because I think, so there's a couple of things that came to my mind while listening to both of you speak. And the first of which is that perhaps, I'm just going to throw this out there, perhaps this wasn't meant to be, this roster wasn't put together with an eye on a World Series championship, because there's no way to guarantee that. But what it was built on was, let's get through a whole season that ends with the postseason. And that is the only possible explanation I can think of as to why we saw the trade deadline that we saw. We saw, yes, plug pieces that are needed, but they weren't splashy. They weren't, this wasn't we're going for it, even though the Blue Jays are going for it. Right? So to me, I'm wondering, and it's something that they, I think it was Mark Shapiro said way back when, and it was, just get in, and then anything can happen. And I wonder if there's some kind of formula, some kind of spreadsheet on Ross Atkins' computer, and it's been shared with everybody in the front office of the, that outlines where you put your energy into. You put all your energy into just getting through the 162, hoping that this is your end? Or do you put all your energy, like, is it wasted energy trying to win a championship in the winter, in April? And I don't know if I'm articulating this well enough, but I feel like I wonder if the goal is just let's get in, make as good a team as we can, so that we can get through a season, and then hopefully we'll end up in the postseason afterwards, where anything can happen. I don't know if there's just too much random in the postseason for this front office, and maybe that has, I don't know, and you know. Dulcimeris on watching on YouTube. First of all, thank you. Welcome back. But the Jays pick up guys who have more years of control. They were definitely looking to the future. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is that they're building a roster that is good now, but also will be good later. And years of what was he called?
Team control.
Team control, yes, but I'm thinking of the sustainable winning. Right? Well, what is that definition? Does that mean sustainable championships? Because there's no way you can guarantee that. But sustainable winning... Anyway, and I'm not suggesting that Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins don't have a goal of winning a World Series. I don't want anybody to take that from what I'm saying, but I'm just wondering out loud if this is kind of the approach here, which leads me to the let's just get hot at the right time. And that's exactly what I said yesterday to these people. Like, think about where the Blue Jays are right now. They're holding the first wild card spot. Okay, they have 61 wins, and they have not been firing on all cylinders. They have not put up a showing like the Yankees did way back when they were playing over their head. Okay, they haven't done any of those things, and yet they're still where they are. And I will also add, when you consider the St. Louis Cardinals, who won the World Championship, and they were a 500 team, I think they may have been a game over 500, anything literally can happen. And so, all of that to say, maybe, just maybe, Steve, it isn't as bad as everybody thinks it is. Again, I'm thinking out loud. So,
I'm sorry. It potentially is as bad as. No, you know what? No, it's not as bad as everyone thinks that it is, and we have to remember too that not every Blue Jays fan. In fact, I would say 90% of Blue Jay fans are not as invested and not as, dare I say, obsessive about what goes on with this team. I mean, they really do allow themselves to be fans. Sit back and they've got the game on in the background and they're playing with their kids or whatever. We're looking at every pitch, and I'm like, wait a minute, was he throwing a four-seamer here? Blah, blah, blah. Not everybody's that obsessive. So I want to put that out there first. Okay. Admittedly, I look a little deeper than perhaps I should in a lot of cases, but it's not acceptable to be just, well, let's just get in. It's not. And when you're building a winner, you're not just building it in the winter. You're not just building it through free agency. And I think the Yankees as a franchise for more than 20 years proved that. You can't just do it in the winter with free agency and then try to buy guys at the dump. It's a season-long progression. That Cardinal team you talked about made additions, not only bringing people up from their farm system, but adding throughout the season so that they could peak at the right time, in mid-August through late September, to barely hang on and win that division, and still win the World Championship. That's the problem with what the strategy is that this front office is trying to put out there. Okay, it's like, okay, we're gonna get all this here, and then they think they have the answers, and that, okay, we've got everything here. All our reports tell us this, so we'll be okay. We're not gonna worry about a bullpen that has a bad stretch or a rotation that has a bad stretch. The numbers are the weighted, expected, isolated numbers are all gonna work out in the end. So we're not really worried about that. That's my issue with this. This is a special team. GMs that know how to win make those moves, and it might not seem like much, but the Potos, the Neanders, David Stearns in Milwaukee, AJ Preller in San Diego, go down the list. Dombrowski, what he has done to get the Phillies back into the conversation. It's been all season long. It wasn't just the winter and then the deadline, and then you just sit back and say, oh, okay, we're good. That's my problem with what's happening. So when I'm critical, it's not that the Blue Jays aren't winning. They're not living up to their potential, because when there are holes or issues, they're not getting the help from the front office. The front office is just saying, this is the team we've assembled, make do with it. They're not getting that additional help that a team might need. Every team is going to struggle. The Yankees have proved that. The Astros, I think, are in for a tough time at some point between now and the end of the regular season. I don't think they're going to lose the division, but I mean, they're going to come back to earth for a little bit too. But they made the type of additions that do make them better. Okay, we're not sitting here watching a game against the Guardians and Trent Thornton comes in and if the game is like 3-2 or 4-2, whatever the score was, and then suddenly it's 7-2. And you knew it was going to be 7-2. You're actually happy that it's 7-2 because Trent Thornton was the guy you brought in to try to bridge you over to try to win in the bottom of the ninth. So that's where my issues lie.
Interesting. Okay, and Steve does bring up some good points in that he did say that good GMs bring in, they make additions, and they may even be small ones. And the argument could be made that that's exactly what Ross Atkins did a couple of weeks ago. He brought in small additions, and then Steve goes on to say that when you have a close game, there's no more trade deadline now, so you have to go with what you have, and we'll talk about how to pick up new players here in a second, because there's some. But close game, and Trent Thornton is your option. Karen, first of all, my wondering out loud, my thinking out loud there, is that a logical train of thought? Do you see the Toronto Blue Jays following that? And second of all, do you agree with the commentary that Steve just gave us?
Well, I can see. Hello. I can see the logic behind what you said, but I myself am not convinced for 1 second that Atkins set out to have the trade deadline that he did that was at least mediocre looking on paper. I mean, you had people in the know, people like Buck Martinez and other people who are behind the scenes who know more than I do about what's going on and more than what most of us know, saying that I think that Blue Jay fans are going to be pleasantly surprised. I think they're working on things that no one's even thinking of. And this is always my argument when people criticize front offices for not doing enough. We don't know what they tried to do, and we don't know what deals he was working on that at the last minute fell through. I read something after the fact that there were multiple teams with good offers to the Marlins for Pablo Lopez, and of course the Yankees were one of them, but they weren't the only one. And at the last minute, Marlins ownership pulled the plug. So how do we know that the Blue Jays weren't one of those? I would bet anything that if Pablo Lopez was out there, I bet the Blue Jays made a pretty good offer to try to get him. And wouldn't that have been something if they had gotten him and even subtracts, even if they got him and not Mitch White? I like Mitch White, but whatever. If they'd gotten him in addition to a few of the other guys that they did get, we'd probably be having a very different conversation. You look at the results, and I don't have any way of believing that that's all they ever set out to do. because there's always, anytime you're in business and trying to make deals, there's always two sides to the deals. If you're making trades, the other team's GM has to be willing to trade the players you want, and they have to be willing to accept what you're offering to trade. If you're trying to sign a free agent, the free agent has to want to come to your team and be willing to accept what you're willing to offer to that free agent in terms of money and term and everything. So overall, I mean, there's been a clunker here and there as far as the deals that they've made, but I look at them from when they took over, from start to not to finish, from start to present, and I think overall they've done a pretty good job, and they keep building, and they're not stopping, and they don't have their eye on it's this time or never. Like you keep building. Like I think maybe the reason the Mitch White trade was announced like basically right at the deadline, right at 6 o'clock p.m., because we were on the air when, Steve, you told us about that. I think that was a plan B or a plan C that they had lined up, and really their sights were elsewhere, and whatever their first choice was probably didn't work out. And then it's okay, well, here's this guy that has some MLB experience. He's been up and down, but let's give him a try.
Yeah, I would guess that a Mitch White isn't a trade that had all of their attention. It can't be, right? And I think both of you have solid arguments, and the fact is we'll never know, right? Unless we wait for Ross Atkins' tell-all autobiography. Go ahead, Steve. You had a point there.
I have to now edit out all the sarcasm I was going to throw out about his tell-all. It would be a pamphlet, like things you send away, like let's go to Luray Caverns. That's what it would be as far as this tell-all. But see, that's the difference. Okay, you need to separate free agency in the offseason from managing team needs and roster construction during the course of the season. And just because the Blue Jays, after the fact, I mean, I have no doubt that there were discussions for Soto, or there were discussions maybe even for Luis Castillo, or players that they were really going for. But the bottom line is they don't execute it. At the times they need to, they don't execute the deals. Luis Castillo went to the Seattle Mariners, who pretty well could pass you for that top wild card spot because they have Luis Castillo. Sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and pay a little bit more to get the player that's going to put you over the top. You've got to throw your carefully laid plans aside, and you got to do what AJ Preller did. Well, when you look back, or even what they did with Hader and Stearns did in Milwaukee, could there be regrets? Could that backfire? Yes, but you really have to focus on what the upside is going to be, and you can't be saying, well, this is going to upset, what our plan is, because we think, by, August of 2033, we'll have been almost to the playoffs. I mean, you can't think about that stuff. You have to just eventually do it. And again, this team is too special. And every season that you do not get to the promised land, you're decreasing significantly your chances of getting there, because the clock is ticking on arbitration and free agency and the contracts that are already signed. So again, I'm sorry, I've been rambling and I apologize for that, but this really does rile me up. It is great, okay, to try to focus on the positive, and it's great to celebrate this roster and these players, which I always encourage. But I think we're sticking our heads in the sand too many times to say, well, there was a reason that this happened. We had the same exact conversation last trade deadline, even with the Barrios pickup, which in essence Minnesota came back to them because the other deals fell through. So they kind of lucked out being patient that time. But we can't keep having these conversations where, well, it was almost, eventually you've got to do it. And if you know Cleveland Guardian fans, talk to them about the Shapiro Atkins years, and they will reiterate almost word for word the same exact things that I've been saying for the 2 or 3 years I've been on Jason from the Couch.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I just wonder if a World Series championship means more to fans than it does to front office executives. I don't know. If their plan is to not overpay on anything, and be good enough to get in, I can't shake that feeling now. And Cleveland certainly didn't win a championship under them either, and who knows. But anyway, regardless, we have now a playoff team. As of today, they're a playoff team who are continuing to make moves. They signed Jackie Bradley Jr., who was cast off from Milwaukee and then Boston. Signed him. It looks like today, an hour before we went on, the Blue Jays were close to a deal for Tsutsugo. I forget his first name. Is Yusei?
Yoshi Tsutsugo.
Yoshi, thank you. How did I forget Yoshi, for God's sake? Anyway, so, and then, of course, we... Bradley Zimmer sent off because George Springer's back. In the context of a season that began with very high expectations, Karen, I'm going to start with you. When you see these names, the Jackie Bradley Jr.'s, who, for all intents and purposes, seems to, in the last year, been unable to hit his way out of a wet paper bag. And then Tsugo, who I've lost I stopped following because he was just not having success. So Karen, when you look at that, both lefty batters, by the way, Karen, when you look at that in the context of the expectations you had for this season, does it add fuel to the fire that's burning in fans who say the season's over?
No, not for me.
No.
Because those guys are not expected to be the star of the team. I mean, we've already got the stars of this team in place. So some of them overall have underperformed on the season, such as Bo Bichette. But I mean, they're not. These guys aren't expected to come in and be Juan Soto or whatever. I mean, they are the complementary pieces that they are. And I give them credit personally because even though it's past the trade deadline, so you can't actually make acquisitions in that way, they're still doing what they can to try to improve the team. They went out and got Jackie Bradley Jr. to fulfill the role that Bradley Zimmer had been fulfilling. And then when push came to shove and they needed roster spots, in their estimation, Bradley Jr. brings a little bit more to the team than Zimmer did. So, I mean, they're still, whether it's big improvements or whether it's fine tuning, they're still out there trying what they can to win. And I want to tear my hair out every time I hear, well, these guys didn't get it done in Cleveland, but that's apples and oranges. What is Cleveland's ownership as compared to Rogers? And who has the deeper pockets? Who is willing to spend the money to win?
That makes it worse, though.
Tying their hands.
No, it makes it worse because now they have the resources to get it done, and they're not getting it done. And in Cleveland, I mean, and to Cleveland's credit, for that little run, they had them break it down when Shapiro first took over, and then they said, okay, we've got our farm system because we want to be good for a long time. We got our farm system. Now you can start spending a little bit of money, and their payroll was in the middle part of the major league payrolls through their stay there in Cleveland. So, okay, you can say that, but I mean, the fact that they now have the resources and are still not getting it done when they really need to, that's even worse because there is no excuse now. Now the emperor has no clothes. Okay, you can't say there's not enough money or blame Alex Anthopoulos for allegedly gutting the farm system. All that stuff's all gone now. Okay. Now they have to get it done, and they're not getting it done. And we're running out of time on the continuum here about having a team win a championship with this core of players.
You, Springer, Barrios, Guzman, Matt Chapman.
Free agents.
Say they're not getting it done. They made those additions.
Okay, has it been enough? It has not, because they've ignored other areas. Again, they can hit. So they're saying, okay, we're not going to really worry about getting a left-handed bat or whatever it is. Or we've signed all these big free agent pitchers, and even went out and got Robbie Ray, which was a really gutsy move to go after Robbie Ray, considering all the problems he was having. But you don't supplement it. It's like collecting baseball cards and then not buying the last series of cards. You don't have a complete collection. You've got all the great zero or card 1 through 400. That's awesome. But card 401 and through 660, which are all the new young pieces or pieces that they want to be more rare or more valuable, you're not completing your collection, I guess is what I'm saying.
And I think maybe that's what we can call these moves. They're trying to still address areas of need that they couldn't or didn't address leading up to the trade deadline in the Tsutsugo and the Jackie Bradley Jr. and all that stuff.
And that's to be applauded. And
whether it works or not, who knows, right? But I think both of you have a very good point here, and because when I listen to both of you, I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, this is a front office who has constructed a house here. They've got it. Their house is in order. Now they're getting in the window dressings and the set with the Tsutsugo and Jackie Bradley Jr. And yes, Steve, you know what? They may be a few pieces away from being just a complete whole championship team. They're not there yet, and that's fine. But you can't necessarily fault them for still working. They didn't throw their hands up at the trade deadline and say, "Oh well, that's as much as we could get done."
Well, again, that's not what I was saying. What I was saying is, you have to keep your eye on the prize the entire time, and you can't just settle for, cats to be named later and things like that. You have to, you've got to be diligent. If you realize that for whatever reason things didn't work out in the off season, you didn't really fill everything you needed, things were falling back, you can't wait to the deadline and then say, oops, well, we still didn't get what we wanted. So, Tsutsugo had an amazing 5-week stretch when he signed with Pittsburgh after being released twice last year. It didn't carry over, but Jackie Bradley Jr. is a great base runner. He's an amazing defender, and that allows them to play Springer in right field on a regular basis. And that really makes it other interesting lineup things that they can play with. But I don't think we're ever going to agree on this. And I don't want to keep going on. That's why I have my own show to lose my mind and stroke out, live, across the world on YouTube and everything. But it really bothers me. The fans that say, "Oh, they're not going to make the playoffs," okay, you're dopes. Okay. Dopes, DOPES. I'll even spell it for you, and I'll give you a crayon to spell it because you probably can't for yourself if you think the Blue Jays are that bad and they're not going to make the playoffs. But what we were talking about all off season, and what we were talking about pretty much right up until the trade deadline, is that this is a team that still could be a division winner and still could go to the ALCS or even the World Series. And I think that's a pipe dream. And it's
right.
The players haven't performed, maybe up to where they need to be. Some guys are having off years. So, there are hundreds of players that want to have a Bo Bichette kind of year and a Vladdy Guerrero kind of year they're having right now. They would kill for that kind of a year. So we're spoiled that way. But I think that's where the difference is. You just can't be satisfied, not with a team this good.
Yeah,
you just can't.
No, and speaking of players who would kill to have Bichette's numbers, I mean, we did sit through Ryan Goins for far too long, right? So this is like, depending on the context, this could be the greatest team ever built. But I wanted, before we get out of here, though, there are some comments that have been coming in throughout the show, and Dulcimerist had this one here. There hasn't been a lefty in the bullpen. Wonder why they didn't bring Gage up. And I know Steve was a Matt Gage fan himself, and it's a solid point. Having that lefty in the bullpen certainly would have helped. And of course, Dulcimerus goes on, no lefty in the pen makes lineups and pitch hitting strategies much easier for opposing managers. It sure does. On Jackie Bradley Jr., he's a slight upgrade over Zimmer. He is taking his role, and absolutely, he's that bench outfielder. Is he better? I don't know. He's a slight upgrade offensively, perhaps. And really, when you think about him or Tsutsugo, you only need them hot for a few weeks. Right, you don't need them hot for 6 months over a season. So here's hoping on that. And then Rocket watching as well on YouTube. Hey guys, just wanted to say that the key to what I heard this episode is that this is a specialty team. It's one thing to be a good team and another to be a special team the way I see it. And I think I don't want to put words into Rocket's mouth, but I think the gist of that comment is that the Jays are a good team. They're just not there like a great championship team yet. We'll see how long it takes for them to get there, but they are making the playoffs this year. And if they're not, I am going to do a whole episode apologizing, and I will. You know what? Actually, this is what we'll do. Anybody who's listening to this episode who believes that the Toronto Blue Jays will not be a playoff team this year, hit me up on Twitter, Doyle JFtC, and we will make a bet. For every single one of you, I'll make a bet with you that they will be in a playoff spot. And whatever it is, I'll, wear something silly on the show, shout out to whoever, but we'll make a bet. Hit me up on Twitter because I will gladly take that bet. And we're just about out of time here. We ran out of time for our fake Blue Jays news segment, and it kills me because it's good, but we are just about out of time. So before we go, I'm going to throw it over to my co-hosts here. Steve, you're up tomorrow on the OnFX Circle, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Let everybody know what you got cooking and how they can follow you and all that stuff.
Okay. Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Fekless Wonder. I have an email address if you prefer hate mail, and that would be fecklesswonder@jaysfromthecouch.com. Fortunately, many of you have not felt that it was worth the time to send me a hate mail, and I don't blame you. I mean, you're probably right. But tomorrow night, the Shadow GM has not gone away. And we're actually going to kind of marry the Shadow GM and the Blue Jays bedtime story segment, in that the Blue Jays bedtime story segment is going to celebrate that 46 years ago last week, Toronto's baseball team officially adopted the name and registered name the Blue Jays. And during the Shadow GM thing, I'm going to suggest a new name and logo for the Blue Jays that kind of maybe ties into what we were talking about tonight. So that's tomorrow night on YouTube, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the OnFX Circle.
Well then, that is must watch right there. And Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time is Sunny Side of the Dome, hosted by Karen. What have you got going on? Let everybody know how they can follow you in that.
Yes, so I'm on Twitter at Karen Soutar1, so just the way it's spelled there, SOUTAR1, and I'm on Twitter quite a bit. Love to talk about things, baseball, other reasonable topics. Mutual respect is always important. and sunny side of the dome on Thursday. So as usual, doing my best to balance positive with realist, and we'll see how they do in the next few days, and the conversation might be different depending on whether they win the series, lose the series, but
Yeah, but no, I mean nobody does it like you do, though, Karen. I mean, it is great. I mean, generally it takes me until your show to try to calm down a little bit, and then you actually do bring me back. It's like, okay,
thank you.
maybe you went too far, Feck, but but I mean, there's nobody out there that does it the way that you do. So, and you should be commended for that.
Thank you.
True story. True story. Sunny side of the dome is your medication for crazy. You heard it here.
That's right. It's your medication to offset on feckism, whatever it is, paranoid, schizophrenic feckism, or whatever. Yeah.
Yikes. And on that note, we are just about out of time here. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. We really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody for your comments during the show. We absolutely love it. And if you think of any while you're listening later on, don't forget you can send them to us at Jays from Couch on our Facebook page, or you can send them to me directly at Doyle JFtC. I would be happy to take those bets. I am a man of my word, so if I make a bet with you, I will pay up. But I won't lose this one, so it's fine. Anyway, I want to say thank you to Steve and Karen for joining me for another week. I really appreciate it. Both of you have been super awesome and a huge support for me, so I love you. Thank you so much. And to all of our listeners, don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, wherever you find us. Give us a subscribe. Tell your friends. Give them the gift of Blue Jays Talk for All. So for Karen, for Steve, for everybody here at Jays from the Couch, this is Shaun Doyle, hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle, and you don't miss it. Take care.